to start with some announcements. Are there any events that members want to mention before we get into some other items?
No, I assume you're mentioning the schedule for that?
Yes, I'm going to do the schedule. And I'm pleased to see that we have both the police and fire chief with us this evening, because one of the announcements, events, I guess, that I want to comment about is the horrific shooting of children in Newtown, Connecticut on Friday. I want to assure everyone that the Brookline schools follow safety and prevention protocols, and including locked doors. And I'm going to ask the chief to give us some information about exactly what our safety precautions are. However, speaking for myself, it is time to end gun violence and to restrict access, especially to automatic weapons. I understand people say that it takes people to kill, but easy access to high-powered military guns makes it all too easy for too many innocent people, and in this particularly heinous case, innocent children, to be massacred. And I think it's time for a robust public debate and a serious effort to limit access to handguns and other weapons. So, Chief, would you mind coming forward? I know that the superintendent has sent around a letter to family members, to parents, explaining how we provide safety in our schools, but I know you had some of your officers out after this event. So just tell us what you can.
Sure. Well, leading up to this, over the last number of years, we've worked together with the schools about helping them on their plans for sheltering in place, and also in their evacuation plans. And also their school security plans. We talked to them about doing closing and limiting access into the buildings after the kids get in. So a lot of that, if not all of it, is in place in every school in Brookline. The events of Friday, I think you spoke very well about it. I won't add anything other than to say I totally agree with what you had to say about it, and I think we all
I actually understand that public safety officers are in favor of gun control in general.
I'm in favor of gun control, and I'm a police chief.
Right.
And I don't think we should have assault weapons on the street either.
Right.
At least in the hands of non-law enforcement people.
Exactly.
I think law enforcement has to meet the threat with the same level of threat that they're faced with. But as far as on Friday in Connecticut, once the news broke on that, we realized the scale of it. Mr. Kleckner and I had spoken that afternoon, and I called Superintendent Lupini and spoke with him for a little bit about plans going forward after school got out and over the weekend. I told him that I thought that it would be a pretty good idea if we could get together and have offices at the schools starting on Monday, opening and closing, and they were going to give a lot of special attention to it, to all of the schools throughout this week. We both agreed to do that. Mr. Kleckner was informed of what we were going to do starting on Monday. We've done that this afternoon. We spoke again. We said that everybody seemed to be pleased with what was going on. We're going to continue it at the schools until, at minimum, on Friday to the end of school, because at that point the classes break for the holidays.
For the holidays.
Yeah. So we have a meeting scheduled on January 2nd with Bill Lupini, myself, Peter Rowe, and Lieutenant Harrington, and Officer Muse of our police department, who are the ones that do a lot of the planning and the evacuation and the sheltering in place drills at the schools. So we're going to review the school plans. We are going to come up with some more suggestions. Bill and I had a little bit of a conversation about what we thought we could have to at least review and probably make sure that everything is getting done that way. And we'll be ready to kick it off starting the first of the year. As far as the police department goes, over the years, we've been into every school in the district with the exception of the new Runkle School. That we have slated to go in to visit during the Christmas holidays. What we do is we work it out with the school custodians, probably starting at 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning. We will have our officers go to the various schools. That they go in there, and we have the school building plans on our laptops in the cruisers. The officers show up at the time They've met with Lieutenant Harrington, the training officers, and they're told of a scenario in a part of the school. Sergeant runs the program. Sergeant is expected to get on the computer, find out where the room is. They put together a plan on how they're going to go in and rescue the children in the schools, and then they go right to where the threat is. Like I said, we've done it over the summertime. We've also done it during all of the breaks. I think the last time we did it was up at Devotion School, and it works pretty well. We actually have it planned. We're trying to plan it now to do Runkle School over the Christmas and back to the old Lincoln in February on the school break. So it's something that we've had in our minds. I know I was reading in the paper about Newtown, Connecticut, that they had done everything right. They had the school in lockdown. This individual had to shoot out a window to get the door open. He got in there and he had a lot more ammunition and 2 other weapons on him. The feeling was he was intent on killing more people. I think the teachers did great by hiding the kids inside the cupboards and covering for them. Basically, when that one teacher got confronted with your kids and they're in the cafeteria or something, then she got killed, but the kids all survived. They did everything right, and they still had 26 deaths. So, and I did read that it was the quick response of the police and that's, I think when the police responded, he ended up killing himself. But 10 minutes is a long time.
Right. Particularly with these automatic weapons.
Yes, and there's you know, they're just made to make damage and kill people, and there's no need for them. So I'd like to say that we practice it here. We know the schools do their evacuation drills. They do their secondary evacuations. You know, but unfortunately, it's becoming a not unusual occurrence in our country.
Yes, right, exactly. Well, I appreciate hearing what you have to say. I hope it's reassuring to folks in the town. We know that you do absolutely as much as you can, and we know that our superintendent, that all of the people in the town who are charged with providing safety do everything they can to keep our kids safe. I'm afraid some of these events are beyond our control, but I think it's very reassuring to know that we've taken the steps to be prepared. So, any other comments, members of the board? Well, we have the chief, certainly Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think, like so many others, was kind of glued to the television to hear the horrifying news and the aftermath, and I kept being struck as I listened with how much that town was sort of like we think of Brookline. And the shooter came from within the town. It wasn't an outside threat. It was somebody living there. And I was very glad that your department was on the ball, and we had a recent episode where somebody was stockpiling weapons in their home, and I'm happy that, you know, you were proactive in taking care of that, because, you know, it makes you realize that even in the safe towns, you can have some people who are not entirely rational. And I would join the chairman in saying I think we need a ban on assault weapons, and I don't see why, you know, if people want to go hunting, I'm not into it, but fine. But I think if you want to be a sportsman and whatever, you can do that with a regular rifle. I don't think people need automatic or semi-automatic weapons. So I would join you in calling for the ban.
Other comments? Yes, Selectman Mermel.
You know, so much of the policy and the reaction around this is is above our pay grade. But a great deal of preparing to how, God forbid, we would respond to a similar situation in Brookline is in our hands. And to the extent that one can feel comforted when thinking about what might happen if this happened in our own backyards, it is good to know that that the department is so prepared, and, you know, thinking about the fact that Runkle just opened literally weeks ago, and preparing to go in and make sure that there isn't a time lapse. And making sure that the department fully understands the layout of that building, and, you know, would be prepared for a situation. I would echo my colleagues' statements about gun control, but add to that and say that I don't think gun control is the only answer. I think it needs to be a comprehensive package to address these types of issues, which includes strong gun control, but also includes comprehensive approach to addressing mental health issues, includes addressing the culture of violence as entertainment that we seem to have embraced as a culture, particularly over the past few decades. And I think that we're going to have to tackle all of those things and more if we want to prevent incidents like this from happening in our schools and elsewhere.
Thank you. Selectman Goldstein, you?
Well, just briefly, I think the three of you have said it all, but as a father of two,
I was going to say, you're the one whose children are still in school.
yeah, two school-age kids, I can tell you, like, with you, Selectman Daley, I was glued to that television and shaking, well, you know, just imagining what it would be like if it did happen here, and I thank God that it did not. And my heart goes out to those parents and the classmates and the relatives of the school administration and faculty who gave their lives and who were wounded. And I applaud law enforcement in that community for having such a rapid response. I do want to pick up on what Selectman Mermel said a moment ago, and I concur on gun control, but the mental health dialogue that needs to take place also, and not just dialogue, but the mental health funding that needs to take place.
Treatment.
We need a comprehensive, federally generated mental health package that will help set some parameters for how screening for individuals with these kinds of propensities occurs, setting up programs by which that screening occurs, and with an action plan, what to do when at-risk individuals are identified. I don't think it's beyond the state of mental health science right now, and I know there's been a lot of advancements lately in brain science and genetic propensities for violence as well, and I think it's time to start bringing that into the mainstream society.
Well, I think our collective thoughts are with those families who were directly affected, or just the members of the community in Newtown, all of whom I'm sure are struggling with trying to understand this really horrible tragedy that occurred. However, we have business to conduct. So I have one specific update and an announcement. The announcement is that the Board of Selectmen will not be meeting on December 25th and January 1st. Next meeting will be on January 8th in the new year, 2013. And I have a brief update having to do with the Waldo Area Study Committee, which met with neighbors last Thursday and presented a number of possible options for developments on the site. The committee has worked very hard to assess the factors in determining actual feasibility for development on the site, and one of the conclusions was that there are many challenges, including vehicular access, the need to bring the Durgan garage up to current codes, and the need for what was sort of described as a front entrance. So the study committee will continue to work and plans to present a report to the Board of Selectmen in the springtime. Any other comments from members of the board? Then we'll move to the miscellaneous calendar. Is there anything that someone would like to hold? Is there an item? Yes. What would you like to hold?
I would like to
Daly?
hear B, C, D, E. No, not E.
All right.
Sorry.
B,
C, D,
C,
F, and H.
D. All right. B, C, D, F,
And
and
H.
H. All right.
I agree.
And since we may give Selectman Benka a chance to come, we know he's been held up. I'll hold the minutes because he often has some corrections to provide. But moving along, the question of a contract for parking violation process and collection services. Who's here to speak to that? Commissioner?
I'm going to speak to C,
Oh, okay.
and the chief will speak to B.
Okay, fine. You may share the podium.
Thank you. We thought it important to address item C first because that's the issue that drives
Sure.
item B. As you're aware, the town administrator some time ago formed a parking meter task force to look into some of the issues that were brought about by the installation of the multi-space meters, and that's the last time you're going to hear me say that tonight. I'm not saying it again. But the recommendations of the task force required us to do a trial with some single-head parking meters that would accept credit card payments in lieu of the multi-space meters. We did that trial. We installed 105 what we call IPS meters. In addition to that, we did install a certain amount, a small amount of POM meters that were also credit card acceptance meters. We did that in the three primary commercial districts, just so that we could gauge how well they worked, the response to the public in terms of the ease of use of these meters before we were determined to proceed further with it. In our opinion, they were very well received as opposed to the previous meters that were there. So the task force has made a recommendation that all multi-space meters that were in curbside in commercial areas are to be replaced with these new single-head credit card accepting parking meters. We did put out an RFP. We did get 2 proposals in the RFP. The successful proposal was the IPS group, who did allow us to do a free pilot program with their meters, 105 of them. And the amount that was proposed was very advantageous. And basically the plan provides for us to remove 58 of the 80 multi-space meters that are now in service. All of those 58 being the ones that are dealing with curbside parking. It will be 22 multi-space meters that will remain in the commercial parking lots. And of the 58, we have included 49 for trade-in. The successful proposer has agreed to take them in trade and apply a credit to the total amount of the new meters. And I'll talk about that amount in just a minute. But of the remaining 9, 5 of them are going to be relocated as additional multi-space meters in the parking lots to try to ease some of the queuing that now occurs with the few meters that are there. And that will leave us 4 of the digital loop meters as spares for spare parts and the like, so, or redeployment somewhere else. So we will end up with 27 of the digital multi-space meters in the parking lots. The rest will disappear. They will be applied to a credit in this contract. The total proposal for this contract was $231,461 for the purchase of 405 of the IPS credit card meters. However, we will be receiving a credit of $202,125 on the trade-in from the digital loop meters that we're turning back. So the net cost to do this program with 405 of these new single-space credit card acceptance meters comes to $29,336. So that's what we've got before you and are asking you to approve as item C. And then once that is done, the chief can talk about item B, which talks to the equipment needed for enforcement.
Okay, questions for the commissioner? Selectman Daley.
Just a comment, I was a skeptic that you were going to be able to get money for the parking meters that nobody liked, but good job on getting the quite reasonably sized credit toward this contract. So.
Well, nobody liked them in Brookline.
Okay, Chief, if you would give us an explanation about your violation process and collection services, and then we probably vote these together.
Sure. What we did is, now that we're going to go pay per space, We wanted to upgrade some of the ticket writing capabilities that we have. Right now, we have a company that we've contracted with called Velocum that we use a pen, and the parking control officers still handwrite it. We thought that we were we could do better than that by getting a unit that they could type in, or a lot of the fields could be automatically filled in that would reduce the time to issue the ticket, but also reduce ticket appeals when we have a problem with reading different people's
yes,
different
illegible handwriting.
Yes. So what we did is we involved the parking control officers in a study with us to take a look at some handheld units that we wanted to get. With the help of the parking control officers, we picked a unit. We want to buy 20 units of these handheld units, and they're actually all wrapped into one. The ticket issuance, the keyboard that you write on, but there's a lot of features that we don't have today that we will have then. Just to put in perspective, as of December 15th, we hand wrote about 70,000 tickets in town. Under the Velocum system, we entered in computer-wise just under 68,000. And we did that with some of that old equipment. Some of that Velocum equipment started to break down. We didn't replace it because we knew we were going to go to this new system. So this new system will now, I want just a couple of features that it has. When a parking control officer walks up to the multi-space meter and gets within a certain amount of, certain distance from the multi-space meters, they can take a look on their screen and they will tell them which spaces are not paid for. So then they go back and they can issue their tickets. It also has a barcode on it, which means they don't really have to write anything in for the most part. Most of it can be inputted from a person's parking sticker. I mean, a person's inspection sticker. Massachusetts and most of the surrounding states all have that capability that they can walk up, place the unit close to the windshield, and the fields all populate themselves. Another thing that we do is we can have the toll list inputted into this piece of equipment, so when the officer or the parking control officer writes the ticket, it checks the toll list, and if it's on the car's on the toll list, we'll know, and we can take steps to tow the car at that point. And another one of the features is we will be inputting data into all of these machines of the locations of our parking meters in town. So when a parking control officer walks up to a parking meter, says, okay, meter 123, meter 123 is located at 350 Washington Street, the location will then populate itself too. So it's going to take a lot of the errors out. It's going to speed things up. I think it's going to be a better system. I think it's very much worth it. And the system updates every 3 minutes. So we use our wireless system in town here, so when the ticket is written, it automatically goes to the company that we're going to contract with, and it automatically enters into our database here at the police station. And finally, what it's going to do is allow for online ticket payment, and actually much quicker, because if you want to, you can pay the ticket within 3 minutes.
Wow.
So.
Sounds very impressive. I'm going to ask you a question that may have already been thought about by either you or the parking committee as we get into more and more Wi-Fi devices. Because of a personal experience this weekend on Saturday, power went out in my home, which took down my in-house Wi-Fi system, which actually took out my access to the internet, and we had sort of computer silence for a little while. And I'm thinking, we are more and more dependent on these devices. Are we planning in some sort of backup, or I guess I know you can't have a fail-safe system, but at least support in case we do lose power? I mean, there are hurricanes and things that happen.
We still aren't going to get rid of the paper tickets. So that is a fallback that we have. But also these handheld units, if the tickets are issued and for some reason the parking control officers are in a spot where the node might not be working, if they walk, as they walk through their route and they hit it where the node is working, this information is stored in the handheld unit and then will get transmitted. So there is a storage capability that when the Wi-Fi comes back on, the information in that unit then gets transported to the company into our database too. So.
Okay, good. Questions, Selectman Goldstein?
Thanks. I'm certainly glad that parking tickets are going to be more efficient. I think you're also already quite efficient, though.
Thank you. We
Wondering
can always do better.
What
We can always do
percentage
better.
of those tickets are my tickets? Do you know? Is that data available?
I'll never tell.
Okay. I'm just curious, though. It seems like we bought new handheld devices not too long ago. Is there a secondary market for used handheld devices?
Some of those handheld devices, well, the thing was with those they were the state-of-the-art at the time. It had the handheld devices, but they also worked off of a Sprint phone system, which a lot of it we don't use the Sprint anymore. So as far as the police department goes, we're retaining some of those, and we'll use them to issue our town bylaw violations. Because if we do it from the town bylaw violations, it'll go right into our database system and eliminate all the data entry. So we are keeping some of them. And the others, like I said, there's several of them were damaged and we didn't replace them. So they've been slowly being phased out. But there are other town departments that use the Velocum system to issue tickets and bylaw tickets and do inspections. And we won't throw them out. We will be distributing the rest through the different departments if they need them, that are working.
Thank you, Chief.
Selectman Daley?
And that had actually been one of my questions too, because I said, wasn't it just, a short time ago that we were authorizing buying another system? But the other question I have is that even our cell phone now can take a picture, so why don't you get one that just takes a picture of that license plate or something, and then there can be no dispute?
Oh, don't we already have enough
I
pictures
think
of
we
license
have
plates?
camera.
Well, if they're,
But we can only do that between 10 p.m. and 6
okay, all right. Well, then my final question is, it says in here that the cost is 61 cents per ticket, and that is not the full cost, including the equipment. You're talking about the transaction cost that we're gonna pay this company who we deal with, is that right?
I'm pretty sure that's a transaction cost that we're paying the company per ticket, yes.
I think we get
David might, well, if not, David can straighten that one out.
give you the equipment for it.
Mr. Giannakakis, tell us the real truth here.
David Giannakakis. Yes, actually, the 61 cents includes the cost of all the equipment. It actually includes the transaction cost, and there's a refresh cycle that is anywhere from 3 to 5 years, depending on how the equipment is used. So it's instead of actually buying the equipment and then 2 or 3 years from now having to spend $50,000, $100,000 on replacement, this process, while it does charge per citation, it actually does allow for a replacement. If something is damaged, they will include replacement. So there is no set price for the equipment. It's included in the per citation, 61 cents. And that was actually the low bid of all the companies that did submit proposals.
Great. Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, I move that we award and execute a contract for parking violation process and collection services with Professional Account Management LLC in the amount of, well, I guess actually we're not doing it in an amount, are we? It's an estimated annual cost of $60,000 to be funded from account number 21002050524010. And I move that we award and execute the contract for RFP number P-13-12 single-space credit card acceptance parking meters with IPS Group in the amount of $29,336. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next item is the BAA funds for Brookline Day. Ms. Paradis?
Thank you. I brought this before the town administrator and asked him to bring this on my behalf to the selectmen to authorize money to be spent from the BAA, Boston Athletic Association funds that are given to the town each year for the Boston Marathon, to be allocated to continue the tradition of Brookline Day that was started this past September.
And I believe the Brookline Day was funded this time without BAA funds, right? Your first time out?
That's correct. It was a
Yeah.
combination of recreation revolving fund money and donations, sponsorships.
I was remembering sponsorships as
That's
part
right.
of
So
the
we had some
funding source.
sizable sponsorships from Brookline Bank and a couple of other places, but we also collected fees for the tables, the vendor tables, so that offset some of the money.
Right.
We had some sizable first or one-time costs, but each of the departments, I must say, also incurred their own costs. So the building department was minimal, but the Parks and Open Space under the DPW department and the police department also incurred a total of about $8,000.
Great. Selectman Daley, you have
No,
further?
just wanted to say, I think you did a great job with Brookline Day, and this seems like an appropriate source of funding for it.
Selectman Goldstein?
Thanks. Two questions. First, we thinking about the same time of year for Brookline Day next year?
We are.
Early September?
Yes.
I think that was
Yeah.
the idea. I've mentioned this before, and I could be opening a huge can of worms, but we don't have a fireworks event in Brookline. And is there any thought been given to making Brookline Day, about topping off Brookline Day with Brookline Night and having a fireworks display and figuring out what that would cost and what the logistics involved would be?
Well, we do know the cost because originally when we first planned Brookline Day, let's just say we had sort of a big pie in the sky or fireworks in the sky.
Yeah,
I thought about that.
literally.
Literally, you're right. And the cost of it is about $20,000. You know, and it's more, the cost of just the fireworks are about $20,000, but we thought more about the length of the day as well and how we would plan that out. We decided the first year to go with that sort of truncated 11 to 3. This year, I think we're going to expand it. We've had some feedback. We had some great feedback about some of the things that happened really well there and some of the things that we needed to tweak. And one of the things that we're going to do is expand the hours for a couple more hours, one on either side, I think. But I have to say, I think we'll need another year under our belts to maybe expand to a fireworks kind of celebration. It was a big undertaking this year, and I think while we've gotten really good at it, actually with some of the things that we did last year, I think we're going to need a lot more volunteers to be able to man the ship this year, to be able to kind of make it, you know, until we can actually go until like an 8 o'clock or something like that. So, but I'll put you on the committee.
Future goals.
Volunteering
All right.
right here.
All right.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Paradis? Seeing none, I move that we authorize the use of $20,000 from the BAA funds for Brookline Day 2013. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Mermel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And let's see, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Ms. Paradis. Next is Heath School. Mr. Mazik, tell us about this change order?
This is a amendment for the design architect of record. Working under an MSBA process, Mass School Building Authority process, you have to negotiate the architect's contract early on in the process. And we thought, in speaking with the architect, that the involvement of the architect during what's called contract administration would be 2 to 3 days per week. As we got into the contract, it became more of a full-time basis. And so, to get the quality of the product, there was a certain additional vigilance that was needed by the architect, and I think we got the dividend in a very high-quality school, but it took a lot of attention on behalf of the architect to get the quality of the product that we envision in Brookline.
Okay, questions for Mr. Mazik?
No, I'll just mention that this was discussed at the building committee and understood and approved.
Right, and I have to say, having seen the results, I would tend to agree that it was a worthwhile, to have the supervision because the results are pretty spectacular.
I agree.
Okay, then, no more questions. I move that we approve amendment number 4 to the He School renovations and additions project in the amount of $58,734 for work to be completed by Miller Dyer Spears. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And now the Runkle School.
Good evening. The question before you is approval of change order number 45 to the contract between the town of Brookline and G&R Construction Incorporated for work related to the John D. Runkle School. I think there may be a little typo on the agenda. The actual net deduct of this change order is $43,509. I may have transposed some of the numbers when I gave that to Mr.
Okay, so you're saying, Mr. Quigley, the amount that's on this sheet, which is 43,509,
That's correct.
that is the correct number?
Right, the number
Okay.
on the agenda, I
This
think
agenda's got a
right,
typo.
right.
All right.
So, that's the net, there's a whole bunch of changes, adds there, and a number of credits, and the net is a deduct to the contract of $43,509. This has already been approved by both the Building Commission and School Committee and Architect. And I can run through all 22 items, or take questions, whichever you prefer.
Why don't you take questions? Any questions for Mr. Quigley? Yes?
No,
Selectman
well,
Daley?
our Runkle committee hasn't met recently, but I want to say that I went to the school a few times toward the end, and I know they were being very conscientious about finishing all the work that had to be done, and I'm sure some of this relates to that stuff at the end there.
Indeed, it does.
Okay. Then I move that we approve change order number 45 in the amount of $43,509 for work completed by G&R Construction in connection with the Runkle School project. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And now I am
Thank you.
going to, thank you, Mr. Quigley, move change order number 1 in the amount of $969.20 in connection with the Clark Playground landscape improvements in the language printed in the calendar. And I'm also moving approval of change order number 1 in the amount of $2,594.40 for work to be completed by Allied Paving Corporation, again in the language in the calendar. And I'm also moving granting a temporary license for all kinds beverages to Lars Anderson Auto Museum for an event on January 26, 2013. And I'm moving granting a temporary all kinds alcoholic beverage license to Pine Manor College in connection with an event on January 10th, 2013. All in favor of those items, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And not
You want
having...
to do the minutes as
Yeah,
amended so that
let's do the
Selectman
minutes.
Benga
Yeah,
can
let's vote.
submit his-
If you have corrections or changes to the minutes from December 11th,
I
please
sent mine
let's give
around.
them
I
to
had a few.
our faithful translator over there. And I move that we approve the minutes of December 11th, 2012 as amended. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And now we will move to the next scheduled item, which is a grant of locations for N-Star. Mr. Ditto, and is there an N-Star representative here?
There she is.
Good evening. The
Penniman Road and Dean Road.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Ditto.
N-Star Electric Company is petitioning the town for permission to install
I know.
7 feet of conduit and 1 manhole on Dean Road at the intersection of Penniman. The Department of Public Works reviewed the request, and we take no exception. The statutory 7-day notices were sent to the abutters, and to my knowledge, we have not received any complaints about this petition. There is a representative from N-Star here present to answer any questions you might have, and this is a public hearing.
Right. Are there any questions for Mr. Ditto or, yes, Selectman Daley?
Yeah, I just wondered how long you expect this, the road to be torn up there?
I was told it can take probably 5 or less days.
Okay.
Weather depending or,
Okay, as this is a public hearing, is there anyone present who wishes to speak either in favor or in opposition to this grant of locations? Seeing none. Any other questions from members of the board? Then I move that we approve or grant permission to construct and a location for such a line of conduits and manholes with the necessary cables therein under the following public way. Dean Road southerly at Penniman, a distance of 7 feet for conduit from the new manhole to an existing manhole and to install 1 new manhole. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
thank you, and happy holidays.
Same to you. Next item is a request to authorize filling the the position of Business Administrative Manager in the Traffic and Public Safety Business Office of the Police Department. Chief.
Good evening once again. This is the first step of a study that we had done over the last couple of months to look at the civilian staff in the police department's traffic and records, and also in our combined police and fire public safety business office, which handles the budgets and payrolls and billings of both police and fire departments. And it was also prompted by a retirement of the supervisor, civilian supervisor who ran our traffic and records office. So with that as the background, Chief Ford and I had talked about getting a look at how our civilians go about doing their work and seeing if there is a better, more effective way that we could do that. So working with HR, Sandra DeVoe, we engaged a consultant to come in and take a look at the workflow, also the locations of where our staff sit, where they work, and the processes that are in place, and what we can do, and where we wanted it to get to. So based on that, there are several recommendations from her report that we are looking at and have a timeline to put in place. But one of the first ones is that we want to co-locate the offices, combine the offices of the 7 civilians that we currently have working into one office. It'll be the office as you go into the public safety building on the right, which is the larger one that's now just houses traffic and records. But we had a person come in from W.B. Mason and lay out how it would look, adding one more station, which would be a supervisor station. This civilian would then have supervision over all of the civilians that work in our building in those offices, and they would have a dual report to both the business manager and the traffic captain. We are asking, we revamped the job description of our traffic supervisor to this new position. It's rated the same. There's not an increase in pay, and we'd just like authorization to go ahead and fill it. Like I said, it has been vacant since the end of June of this year. What we're going to do is we're going to post the job, and we're going to seek qualified candidates and go through a hiring process and get the best possible candidate that we can.
And may I speculate that this is also in some way will be supporting your new processing system for traffic parking violations? I mean, this is all part of a larger picture of
Yes.
Upgrading and reorganizing.
And we hope to have this person in place before those handhelds come in, if we can get everything done in a timely manner.
Great. Questions for the chief? No?
Nope.
Well, this sounds like a slam dunk. I move that we authorize filling a newly established position of Business Administrative Manager in the Traffic and Public Safety Business Office of the Police Department. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Welcome, Selectman Benka?
Thank you. Aye.
And Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So,
Thank you.
good luck.
Thanks.
And now we have an interview for our newly what we are establishing as our permanent neighborhood conservation district. Ms. Goldberg, are you here? Yes, you are there with us.
This is all new to me, coming over to the new furniture.
Right. Well, welcome, and tell us why you're interested in this
Well,
opportunity.
I'm extremely interested in serving as a commissioner on the Neighborhood Conservation District Commission because I strongly feel that this particular device is really an excellent way in which to bring neighbors and neighborhoods together in order to preserve the character of that neighborhood. And I think that the reason I really particularly like it and would like to participate in the beginnings of this type of work is because I think that it allows neighborhoods to go forward without some of the encumbrances of necessarily a local historic district or for neighborhoods that might not necessarily apply, but they have the opportunity to work together as a neighborhood to determine what is best for that neighborhood and preserve the character of our town overall. The other thing that I really like about these districts is that they can be individualized for the type of neighborhood that it is. And I think that it gives a great deal more flexibility. I'd like to participate because I think that I have things that I can bring to the table. I may not be a preservationist and I may not be an architect, but as a multi-generational resident, I obviously didn't live here multi-generations, but I have
That would be quite an
three generations of my
accomplishment.
family, thank God, still living that have lived here. There are actually things about Brookline that many of you in this room aren't aware of that have changed. That I even, I was thinking back on my ride over here in my sophomore year at college, wrote a creative writing paper about the changes in Coolidge Corner and how what all of you know is the big gray apartment building next to the hotel on the corner of Webster Street. I bet many of you don't know, maybe Ken you do, that there was a church there. And I used to sit on those steps every day when I walked there from Brookline High School after school. And I thought that was a real shame, and I continue to feel that way at 58 years old. So I think that what I love about this particular a neighborhood district commission is that it allows us to preserve without scaring off or making people uncomfortable with the idea of coming into a group and working together preserve a character. Now, the things that I bring, I think that it's beyond just a full appreciation of our community and its physical characteristics, a desire to see balanced development, which is something that I profess to be and have cared deeply about for a long time, and a passion about our community, but also the ability to work with diverse groups of people and bring them together to a conclusion, to a way in which they can come together and find commonality to move forward. And I think all of you are aware of my many years of working towards that. And it also, it's productive. Rather than having two groups on adversarial positions that then nothing happens, it becomes a productive and hopefully good process for people. I think it's the beginning of when you were saying our new moving forward Neighborhood Conservation District Commission. I think that it's got a lot of possibilities, and so I'd like to be part of that. I have not stopped, obviously, being involved in the town since I left your chair, Betsy. And I'm a town meeting member, and I get myself involved in all sorts of little things. So I still very much care, and I don't plan on leaving here. So I care about what my neighborhood and what our town looks like 20 years from now, and I'm hoping my children will live here. So I think for some people to wonder how maybe publicly I've taken a position that might seem contrary to being supportive of this, I think they have to dig a little deeper to understand why I do some of the things I do sometime. Because for me, it's about people being educated, it's about people understanding, it's about people working together, and really having a grasp of what they're doing moving forward. And I believe the commission can accomplish that in supporting people as they move forward and look at what they want to do with their neighborhoods. I would not, under any circumstances, be a member of a commission that I did not believe in their mission. And so that's why I'm applying for this, and I hope all of you will consider me.
Well, I think probably some people would like to ask you a question, members of the
Fire
board.
away.
Any questions for Ms. Goldberg? Yes, Selectman Goldstein.
Thanks. Deb, thanks for volunteering for this, and thanks for being, completely upfront about the perception that you may have been opposed to various NCD, aspects of NCD in the past. Can you put a somewhat finer point on what you're coming to this position, what kind of precognitions you might have about it? I'll help you with that. How do you see the difference between preservation, zoning, and what the NCD might accomplish?
Well, firstly, are you referring to local historic districts in terms of preservation, or are you referring to just preservation generally?
Yeah, thanks. Local historic districts would be
Well, a local historic district has enumerated guidelines, and there is flexibility within those guidelines to a certain degree, including the possibility of hardship for some of the applicants. And it applies, once a local historic district is adopted, it applies to that neighborhood. And it's, you can be denied a building permit if you aren't in compliance with a preservation, with the local historic district guidelines. Zoning also has its own set of rules and regulations, and those are more obvious often to people within the community, because in every city and town there is zoning, and you don't always know when you're moving into a community whether it has a local historic district or an NCD or what it has, but you do know that your house is zoned no matter where you live. So that's a much clearer thing that people understand. And of course, when we were involved in the comprehensive planning process during my tenure here, I had hoped that some of the issues that we then saw after I left would have been dealt with in the comprehensive plan in terms of overdevelopment, impinging on neighborhoods and that kind of thing. But what I've begun to realize is zoning's sort of like the common law. It evolves, and that at times it has to be changed, but that until that change happens, it applies, and those are the rules. I think that Heath School area and that particular issue around the NCD is an example of where it's very complicated from a zoning point of view. And so potentially, if in an area like that there was more work done around an NCD, the whole neighborhood might embrace that and move forward if they could be given that opportunity again if they needed to. An NCD, what's interesting about that, and from what I've read a great deal on it and looked at it outside of Massachusetts and statewide, it's a little bit amorphous by community. There can be different standards and different ways of applying it, and it's also can be individualized per neighborhood. So consequently, that's why it's a really good device, because what applies to, I'm trying to think of an area that doesn't have a local historic district that I can just pop out in the front of my head. Let's say the Brown Street area of Coolidge Corner may not apply to Newton Street. And so say those two neighborhoods both wanted to think about looking at an NCD, the commission would be working with them about what exactly is appropriate for this area. And it isn't really a zoning thing. It's not, do we change from an S15 to an S40? It's, as you as a neighborhood see development moving forward, what are the elements that you think are critical and what is reasonable moving forward? And I think that what I bring beyond being an architect or a certified preservationist brings is that sort of broader vision, a more strategic vision, and the ability to also get differing people to talk about these things and see how they can do it together. So that's sort of my quick down and dirty on that.
Thank you.
Selectman Marmel?
Deb, I'll also thank you for applying. I always
Thank you, Jesse.
worry about past selectmen maybe being gluttons for punishment when they
Well,
come back and dip their toe in the water. Certainly, anyone who's sat on this board and then comes back to serve on another board has already paid their dues, so thank you for being willing to continue. Picking up a little bit on what you talked about in your initial remarks, can you tell us a little bit about how you imagine a scenario playing out where perhaps a neighborhood comes before the commission and you don't necessarily agree with the way they would characterize their district, or perhaps not even agree with whether or not they should exist as a district at all? How would you envision your role in that process being, A, while the process is going on, and B, after it's finished, if you might still disagree with the final outcome? How do you think that would work for you as a commissioner?
The commissioners really, I'm not sure that's their role. I feel that if a neighborhood is in agreement, then I agree with them. And so my feeling is it's how do I help them then move through the process along with the other commissioners? This is going to be a well-populated board, and so it's group work. It's not one person. And so that's my position. I think a perfect example is Lawrence School, which, because I did not support a local historic district on Fisher Hill when I was back in 1997, people said, she's against local historic districts. Well, that's not the case. Lawrence School is a case in point. They wanted it, I voted for it. I'm for people coming together and coalescing and working towards their goals, and I support that. What happens sometimes, and you've all experienced this, is you have reasons why you take the positions you do, which aren't necessary. I've taken positions that didn't necessarily reflect publicly taken positions, how I personally felt. I think Greeno Street's a perfect example. I wanted Greeno Street to be open, but my role as a selectman was to understand what the neighbors want, and of course they didn't necessarily agree on that, and find some way that they could work together and move forward. And I think actually it's worked out very well. So even I don't mind Greeno Street being closed during the day. But having grown up and driven down that street my whole life, it was a hard adjustment. So I think that's where I would be.
Thanks.
Other questions? Selectman Benka?
Yeah. You've alluded to the Fisher Hill Local Historic District that you opposed, and the area around the Heath School, the Settlement Neighborhood Conservation District that you opposed.
I don't think that I opposed it. I believe that I made a motion to refer it to a moderator's committee for the very reasons that I actually am discussing here tonight.
Okay. I guess, one can argue with respect to a local historic district, a particular one, or a particular neighborhood conservation district, whether there was enough neighborhood support or not enough neighborhood support. But I guess what I would ask is, you also voted against the neighborhood conservation district enabling legislation in November of 11.
I did.
And why did you vote against that?
Well, for the reasons why I'm standing here tonight. And that is because I was uncomfortable. I actually feel that what happened at Heath School is what I worried about would happen. And I felt that there was not, in that circumstance, enough direction, and I hadn't understood as well that the process of the commission moving forward would work through these issues. And I think that the neighbors at Heath would say now that they would have liked it to been enumerated a little bit better, and that it may have been early for them to be doing this because they felt they were plowing through sort of unknown territory. And that's why I'm here today, because I'd like to be part of the solution so that these districts can move forward and be a device that's well used in the town.
I guess the concern, there was a very small minority of town meeting that voted against the enabling legislation, the general enabling legislation for NCDs. And I guess the question is, how can you have comfort that you're not breaking faith, or we're not breaking faith with those who voted for the concept of NCDs?
I don't think I think that people are allowed to vote based upon how they feel about a situation, and that there are lots of layers to that. And I was uncomfortable with the way in which the enabling legislation was written at the time. I now feel that moving forward, we can do a lot of good things. I never said at the time I don't like neighborhood conservation districts either. And I've had actually some very productive conversations with people from South Brookline who've known me long enough and who know me well enough that they know I would not be applying to sit on this commission if I didn't think that I could be a positive part of the process.
Thank you.
And I have made that commitment.
Okay, thank you very much for your interest. We will not be making appointments till we've done all of our interviews. I think we have 2 more candidates, and that will obviously not be able to happen until January. So maybe by the end of January, you'll hear from us, and we'll take our vote to make the appointments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's nice to see all of you. And I too wish you a very happy holiday.
Thanks, Deb.
Good.
You too.
Thank you
And
very
please
much.
extend, I heard about Sean Cronin losing his dad, and please extend my deepest, sincerest condolences.
Thank you. Okay, we will now hear the report of the Audit Committee, and Selectman Daley is moving to the podium to lead us through this. I turn this over to you, Selectman Daley.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the Audit Committee is chaired by myself, and we have 3 members appointed by the moderator, Greg Grobstein, Jim Littleton, and Christopher Cox, who are all CPAs. Ben Chang, who has joined us from the school committee, he has a finance background, and Lee Selwyn, an economist, represents the advisory committee. And our ex officio members are Steve Cirillo, Michael DePietro, our new controller, Peter Rowe, Deputy Superintendent of Schools, and Sean Cronin. And I want to say that, everybody really it's a very dedicated group. It's a nice group to work with. They put quite a bit of effort into it. So the reports you have before you tonight in the binders are the what we call the audit, and I think I'm using the terminology of the accountants when I say it was considered a clean audit. That's good news. It was, they did not find anything they needed to correct. And I just want to explain, I know I've said this before, but probably, it's probably the audit goes out of your mind in between these annual visits. When they have to use the government accounting standards, and what they do is they look at certain information. They pay particular attention to our cash accounts, and then they drill down on certain areas, and they try to test specifically enough areas to make sure that there are no irregularities, but they constantly caution us that they don't test everything, and so that there could be, it's not a forensic type of audit, so there could be problems, but nothing that they found. And I will say that from our behalf and what we heard from, this is Richard Sullivan from Powers and Sullivan, and with him is Craig Peacock and Dennis Cohane, is that right? They got very good cooperation from our staff, from Steve, and Judy Hoppin, who's retired, our controller. And I want to say, Judy, I know, worked very hard, wanted to have everything perfect before she left, and she even came back, I think, after retirement. She even came back for a few days to make sure that the audit was all going well and everything was accounted for. So we are lucky on that behalf. I'm going to turn it over to Dick Sullivan now and let him tell you a little more. I will say some of our assets did increase. That has to do sometimes with the timing of getting money from Mass School Building Assistance, or we got a big MWRA sum of money for the sewer separation on Lower Beacon Street. So it's not really a situation of having extra money we can spend. It's sort of just the timing of the thing. The other thing I want to make a note on is the OPEB funds. At the urging of our committee and I think others, the OPEB committee reduced the expected rate of return. When we set up the trust fund, we were allowed to go to 8.15%. And we have ratcheted it down to 7.75. And I realize that may or not be the current rate of return, but it is perhaps more realistic in the next few years, looking at, and so what that does is it increases our overall liability, because when you're saying we think we need to put together X number of dollars, and that we'll, as we're putting this money into the trust fund, we'll get, invest it and get returns. As you say, well, we estimate our returns are going to be lower. That increases the ARC. However, we have managed to put more money into that fund a little quicker, a little more money, a little more quickly than we had originally thought we might be able to. So so that the overall ARC is reduced, and we hope to reach the ARC, which is the annual required contribution, by 2023. So it's while that seems a long way off, and Steve says he's not sure he can hang on that long. It is, it's getting more realistic, and certainly, as I've said before, we are in better shape than anybody except Wellesley.
We're going to reach it before 350 other communities.
Right.
Or 349 others
Right.
in Massachusetts.
So I'm going to turn it over to Dick now.
I'll try not to, because I think I could put away 2.5 pages here, because she did a good job of giving you an intro of what it was all about. I thought what I'd just do is make sure you understood how the audit process worked a little bit, so in fact you did know there was an audit conducted. And then I'll give you some highlights from an audit perspective, as well as some highlights from an operational perspective. Completing upon that, we'll spend a little time on the federal awards report, and then after that, the management letter. The process here has actually evolved over time, and I think has been very fruitful. We come in usually around the beginning of July, and at that time we try to get as many things as we can do without having the full general ledger closed. However, one of the things that's always completed by that time is cash, which was about $105 million at the end of June. And so we do audit cash during that time period. So we come in July for 2 weeks, and we mentioned these two fellows over here. They're the core team. Craig's a partner, and Dennis is a manager, and they actually spend a lot of time out here making sure that the work is done, and is done in an efficient manner. We then come in
We
right after.
thought they were part-time employees.
I'm just up here as a spokesperson. They're doing most of the work, to be honest with you. We then come in after Labor Day, and that's another 2 to 3 weeks worth of work. And then we tie up pretty much everything that couldn't be tied up when we first came out, and then do what we call our substantive testing, which means walking down the balance sheet, excluding cash, which has already been audited, and looking at receivables, capital assets on the assets side. And to give you an idea, including the retirement system, and to give you an idea, $595 million worth of assets you had at the end of June. Then you go on the liability side. Already we mentioned a little bit of the OPEB. We also have payables. We have $78 million worth of debt, and we audit all of that too. We do testing of transactions, which include vendor expenditures, payroll expenditures. We look at journal entries, and the reason we look at journal entries is most systems are designed that when the transaction goes all the way through to the posting to the general ledger, it's done correctly. Some journal entries are needed just out of the normal course of business, but if there's a preponderance of journal entries, that means there might be something wrong in the design of the system, because something has to be corrected all the time. So we test those too. We had what I would call a very efficient timeline. So we're finishing up about the middle of December to end 3/4 of the way through September. We issued our drafts in October. Finals were done in December after we met with the audit committee, which was on November 28th, and we're here today. So from a highlight standpoint, and I'll talk about the results of the audit a little bit, and from a financial standpoint, you had an unqualified opinion, the acronym being a clean opinion. There were no journal entries or no adjustments that we recommended be made to the books, which means everything that we audited, we felt was accurately presented, but it also gives you the confidence that the information you were receiving during the year was also accurate, and didn't, in effect, didn't have to be changed as a result of our audit. We did have good coordination with every member of the management team in terms of us trying to get the work done. We come in like the Marines, we try to be as efficient as possible, and when our clients have a sense of urgency like we do, it's very much appreciated. From a financial result perspective, the general fund actually did, I would say, a lot better than anticipated. When you put together the budget, you anticipated using a little over $5 million in free cash. Because revenues came in a little higher than expected by about $3 million, you didn't fully expend all your appropriations, you actually ended up with a surplus of $3.1 million. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but it's only 1.5% of your budget. But it's still a good performance in consideration of what you had anticipated to occur. When you look at it from a structural standpoint, that's one of the things we pay attention to when we're looking at how the budget process works and then the actual performance of that budget. Revenues and expenditures almost increase on a linear basis. Revenues were up about 2.7%, expenditures up 3%. That's a nice little matching because you can kind of almost parallel them. Debt service right now is a very comfortable 4.8% of your budget. You also have a program in place where you're constantly also buying capital assets with current revenues, which we like a lot, which means that your debt service, in some communities I would consider the debt service a little low. I don't have a problem with that with Brookline because you do have, like I said, you buy capital assets with current revenues, which is very good. And I've probably mentioned this in the past, you collect 99% of your current commitment, real estate and personal property commitment in the year it's billed, which is also very good. Another big component of what I think is a positive is right now the Stabilization Fund is $5.8 million. It increased $305,000, mostly because of contributions made by the town into the Stabilization Fund as part of the appropriation budget. We talked about the OPEB trust. Right now, there's $12.7 million in assets in that trust. The unfunded ARC at this time is about $39.3 million, which is showing on your balance sheet. But what's happening is you've got $12 million set aside, you've got a $39 million ARC, and just to tweak, I think, a little bit what you said earlier, that 2023 period was when you're going to be fully funded. There's a real good potential that you could meet your ARC, that annual required contribution, within 5 years at the current pace that you're funding into the OPEB trust. Have I got that right, Steve? I think that's the case. So I consider that to be extremely significant. It puts you, I think you said 350 towns. We happen to audit Wellesley. We know why they have what they have because they had a fully funded pension plan for a while, so they able to divert that appropriation in there. There are other communities who are making good faith efforts to fund OPEB, but not to the size that this community is. And that's something that really, I think, helps with you when you're discussing with Moody's those liabilities that are considered to be unfunded by most of the communities out there.
I'm just to interrupt I'm actually surprised that Moody's hasn't looked more carefully at the fact that there are so many communities that are unfunded and that it hasn't had implications
It's
for them.
probably because of the still relatively newness of the GASB itself, but it's becoming more and more of a hot button. It's becoming more and more a discussion item in venues like this, and it's also becoming more and more of a discussion item when the conference calls are being held with the rating agencies. So I can see, with my best crystal ball, that ramping up in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
On the capital assets, the town spent $40 million, $40.7 million in new capital assets. A lot of it was in the sewer and water, which did receive that MWRA grant of over $12 million. And the other part of it was really the Heath and Runkle School, which was $27 million. There was also several vehicles and pieces of equipment like that purchased, many of which were hybrids, which I noted that I thought was pretty good, and it was also highlighted in the transmittal letter. As I said, debt is very comfortable, 4.85% of your total budget. There was $10.6 million issued of new debt that related to the schools, but also there was a significant refunding done, which is like a refinancing of your house. You take out new debt that's at a lower rate to pay off old debt that's a higher rate. And over the course of 5 to 10 years, that's going to save $587,000 in cash outflow. So that's a positive too. If you look at the enterprise funds and you see a $12 million profit for the water and sewer, that's not because of the rates, that's because of the MWRA grant that was received. And it pretty much broke even, as did the golf enterprise. And your pension assets, very similar to a lot of the pension funds that we saw for the period into 12/31. They went down. You actually had unrealized losses in your investments because of the market value decrease during that period. A lot of that has already been recouped and above the loss as I'm standing here talking to you right now. So a final observation before I back off of the financial statements. We already talked about the clean opinion. The audit is clean, is good. I really like the transmittal letter that's put together by the management team here. The first 27 pages of that document, if you read them, you're going to get a really good idea of what it's like to live in this town and who's managing the town. The policy developments you talk about are like your capital improvement plan, your policies on your use of reserves, you're attacking the OPEB problem and not backing away from it. And then also you actually structured your water and sewer rates differently for fiscal 2012, which had a benefit. I like that document. I like to read it. And if anybody wants to pick up a set of financial statements for the town of Brookline and you don't want to look at anything else, I would look at that because that tells the story that you need to know. So that's kind of the highlights of the financial statements. I actually think they're all good highlights. On the federal awards report, real quickly, this is the one that's required by or mandated by A133 because the town spends more than $500,000 worth of federal funds. You spend $6.3 million, and we have to test about 25% of that. The way the testing goes and the size of the programs and the way they call it clustered together, we tested just under 50% of those programs. SPED, Title I, there was an outdoor recreation planning grant up at the Fisher Hill Reservoir, and we had some ARRA money come in. There were no question costs. There were no deficiencies in reporting. There were a couple of small findings as it relates to, how do I say this? The feds don't give us much leeway as auditors in terms of what we consider to be material versus immaterial. And if you don't cross a dot an I or cross a T, we have to make a finding. Those are pretty much the two findings that you'll find in there. They were non-dollar related, and we anticipate that they will be rectified in the future audits. That's the federal awards report. The management letter, I think I've said this before to you, we have to understand that this is a critical document. It doesn't really talk about the strengths of your systems. It basically is the auditor coming in and saying, we've seen some things, we think there's some efficiencies that can be made, or there has to be a change because maybe the design of what's going on in your internal controls needs to be adjusted. There are no deficiencies, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in this document, which is what you'd want to hear me say. Overall, there's 13 comments. 7 of them we loop around because they relate to last year. 6 have been introduced for the first time. To highlight what they focus on, we talk about internal controls and reconciliations for us are one of the highest internal controls you can have, and that's just subsidiary ledgers agreeing to the general ledger. In that case, it's with withholding accounts and some grant accounts. We also thought there could be approved accounting and reporting, and the 2 areas of those were student activities and the revolving accounts. We looked at procurement procedures. One of the things I didn't mention when we were doing testing, we also test 30B and 149 procurement standards. And we saw a couple of things that we think could be done better there. Again, no significant internal control matters, but things that we thought could be improved upon. And then there's one in payroll where we saw that this is one that we probably would highlight and maybe put a little bit on the top of the list relative to segregation of duties. Because in addition to reconciliation, segregation of duties is probably one of the other priorities of internal control that we look for. So when you look at the management letter as a whole, I think that the items in there warrant the attention that we feel they are because we put them in writing. But they're not something that I believe should make any member here stay up at night. And I would anticipate, just because of the way the audit committee tends to work, working with Steve and his crew, we do tend to see every year an aggressive approach to trying to eliminate them in the subsequent audit. That's the highlights. So I'm more than happy to take any questions into detail or anything that I may have mentioned right now.
Okay. Yes, Selectman Mermel.
Thank you for this, and as always, thank you for explaining it in language that those of us who don't spend a great amount of time sitting on the audit committee can actually absorb and understand. Related to the management letter, I see there are 3 unresolved comments from last year, and as you pointed out, none of this is anything that should keep us up at night, which is a relief to hear. And the management response is in here for all 3 about how the town is dealing with the unresolved comments. Can you give me your sense of the strength of those responses to the 3 areas? Do you feel that that we're making satisfactory efforts to resolve these and they'll be off the table?
I would say, if I was going to rate them in strengths, there's 3 of them. I think it was the fraud risk assessment, the benefits withholding reconciliations, and the student activities. I really do see fraud risk assessment, which is an undertaking that is, I know management is serious about, has a real good chance of at least having some significant progress by the end of next year.
It seems like it's well in the works. It's just a matter of the steps getting checked off the list.
It is. The audit of the student activity funds and what was mentioned related to them, we had good conversations with the school at the audit committee meeting. I anticipate that to possibly be done. I think the benefit withholding reconciliations might be a little bit more difficult to achieve by the end of fiscal 2013, although I know efforts are being made and some modifications are being made. And I believe a citizen has, with the financial background, has volunteered to come on board to help look at the design of that process to possibly make that also be eliminated by the end of fiscal 2013.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Selectman Binka?
Yeah, I'll circle back to the management letter in a minute. You mentioned that we buy capital assets with current revenues. What standard do you use when you're determining whether something is a capital asset in terms of lifespan or dollar amount?
Well, I would say it's probably more lifespan and how you would visualize it the same way. I mean, accounting does a little bit of different things. There's thresholds that say you have to capitalize things if they're more than a certain dollar amount. But when I think of capital assets, I think of vertical structures, improvements to buildings, infrastructure. They were just talking about, I mean, I know it's the electric company, but anytime you dig up and you put in a conduit in, that's a expenditure of a capital nature. Chapter 90 is expenditures of a capital nature. The purchase of vehicles, dump trucks, backhoes, computers, that's, to me, is a capital expenditure. Now, for GASB purposes, not necessarily all of that gets capitalized, meaning it doesn't end up as an asset on your balance sheet, but those are capital in nature.
And for GASB purposes, what is the
threshold
test?
that we're using, and I don't like to do this, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'm going to guess it's $15,000. Does that sound right? Thanks, guys. $15,000. An individual expenditure, like the actual item itself, costs $15,000 or more. It gets capitalized and depreciated based on its asset class.
And with any minimum lifespan as a second?
Probably a 3-year lifespan is the least that you would want.
Okay. With respect, you mentioned that with respect to the management letter, there were no material issues that arose. I'm wondering how you define materiality, and with respect to some of these that can be quantified, what we see are a description of the issue that arose, but not a description of the magnitude of the issue. And I'm wondering if you can link together the statement that there were no material problems here, and give some estimate. For example, contracts getting expanded without complying with 30B. How widespread an issue is that? What kind of dollar amount? what are we talking about?
What we saw is a couple of instances, well, I guess the fundamentals of this piece were, of the testing that we did, we saw one or two instances, I believe we did a sample of about 15 transactions.
Okay.
And we saw one or two instances where, this is also an area where the I's have to be dotted and T's crossed. Because that's where the procurement process goes. But there was also in this case, particularly on school projects, a lot of the paperwork and detailed monitoring was done by the school. And it was also probably done fairly well, but you have a centralized procurement office. And a lot of that comment, as you should look at it and be influenced by it, says that you just can't rely on the school or somebody outside the normal procurement process for the rest of the town do all the right things. There has to be a closer monitoring of that process. And that's what we were recommending here. We didn't really find any issues where something was spent that shouldn't have been spent.
Right.
We didn't find an issue where 3 bids that should have been gotten weren't received. Well, and we did find, though, that there was a decentralization of the information, and that when you go to the place where let's call it the accountability is, it wasn't always there. And that was the real gist of our comment, to kind of consolidate that a little better and do better monitoring.
With respect to the benefit withholding accounts, there were some invoices that were paid that apparently shouldn't have been paid at 100%. You know, are we talking about $2,000, or are we talking about?
Actually, it's not a matter of the invoices not being paid, but because of a portion of every, say, health insurance invoice has the employer share and the employee share.
100% was paid.
Possibly. Yeah. Well, 100% is paid, but the allocation of it and the accounting for it and the reconciliation as to whether it was paid from the right buckets is what the gist of that comment is. And what we become concerned with particularly is if certain accounts go into a deficit balance, which means they should be going against the appropriation versus withholding, and vice versa does occur. And that's what we saw in the string of the HR accounts that we analyzed.
And that's the issue that I think from reading this, it seems that one of the issues is that, and I actually know that this happened with my health insurance, changes get made partway through a month retroactively.
Mm-hmm. And that's a contributor. It's definitely a contributor. Somebody changes from a family plan to a single plan, but the withholdings don't change, or vice versa. Or somebody comes off the plan, but they're not, that census hasn't been updated, so that there's actually a payment being made for somebody who's no longer on the plan. Now, I'm not saying these are factual things that we know, but those are things that can contribute to that. And that's why we think we use the term reconciliation process, but there has to be a better way to manage the withholding accounts and how they're increased and decreased than what has been happening so far.
How do other communities deal with this issue?
It's complicated in every single community, and I'll tell you why. The easiest ones are, let me just step back a little bit, is when you only have one provider or two providers that you say, this is, we got Blue Cross, we got Tufts, and we're only doing HMO whatever and HMO for Blue Cross. That's a lot easier. I was in a community the other day that had 3 different providers that provided 4 different plans within those providers. So their HR people were trying to keep up with 12 different options as it related to the withholding accounts. Because some of them withheld at 10%, but I want a PPO, now you can withhold at 50%. And then some of them, also the way the payment structure went, you also involve the retirees, which becomes more complicated. So I'm going to sit here and say I'm not an expert on everything that you offer, but the more that you offer, the more complicated the process is. The less it's offered, the more simplistic and streamlined it becomes.
And are we not surprised that it's health care or health insurance that sets this off?
Sounds like it's a common problem at any rate.
For our firm, it's been an area where we come out of the blocks every year looking for something, not that we're trying to make something up, but we pay attention to it. We began to pay attention to this type of matter about 3 years ago because we were having troubles with health insurance trust, where a number of our communities were in serious, serious trouble related to health insurance trust. Part of that was a result of the withholdings. You see the withholdings were kind of messed up, so the health insurance trust was also messed up. So our firm, like I said, when we come out of the blocks every audit year, there's certain things that we pay attention to, and we've been paying attention to this for a couple of years now.
I have another question, and I apologize because it may not be an audit question, but you guys are experts on municipal finance, and we got you here, so
Okay.
I'm going to ask it anyway. It's been on my mind a little bit. We pay our real estate taxes quarterly in Brookline. There are some communities that do it twice a year, semi-annually. And, I know when we went to quarterly, it was probably on the theory that cash flow and the time value of the money that we could get by bringing it in early. Well, with interest rates so low now, it's been on my mind whether it still makes sense to do it that way, and whether we're not costing ourselves more just in the generation of those bills and the processing of those bills and the accounting for those bills than we might if we went back to a semi-annual. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I am a proponent of quarterly billing. So, because I've seen it, I've seen some of the smaller communities out there. A perfect example is Chilmark. Just recently, they go semi-annual, and you're able to send out estimates until you get to the last bill. All right. So sometimes when the recap is being certified and your tax rate's being certified, you can send out estimate 1 and estimate 2, and I believe you can send out estimate 3. Well, if you're only a twice-a-year billing, you get 1 estimate. What happened with Chilmark, and not picking on them, is that they couldn't get their recap certified. They had to borrow $4 million of tax anticipation notes at year end to be able to pay the bills through June 30th. So while we're not necessarily earning money on the side of from an investment return, there was a cost associated with that borrowing. It wasn't much, but there's also an administrative piece. As far as let's call it the transaction cost, because I thought about that when they first started, it was first becoming very popular. I think the systems are such that other than maybe having a little extra cost of paper, I don't think there's a lot of extra transaction costs associated with it, particularly with the ability for people to pay online and use lock boxes and things like that. I think that the efficiencies of technology have made the potential cost, let's say, the additional cost associated with it so minor that it really doesn't come into the decision equation anymore. Thank you.
And I just have one, Selectman Daley, please come back to the podium, but I have one question from the management letter, and it's probably very small in terms of dollar amounts, but I am curious to know in your general ledger maintenance item where there were accounts that had funds that had either should have been expended or were just balances being carried. Can you give me an order of magnitude here, just of dollars that we're talking about?
I can't. I'm going to ask just one question, though. Do we have an idea?
Yeah, all right.
You know what? Per account.
Very small amounts.
The idea behind it, though, is it's the larger a ledger becomes and the more account you have, the more maintenance is required just to manage it. And we're just like we talked with Steve. We'd like to see as few cash accounts as possible, so that you can efficiently manage your cash. Managing a general ledger is very similar. So the gist of the comment is not necessarily there's a lot of money there. It's more like, let's clean this thing up and do some housekeeping so you don't have to worry about this stuff anymore.
Right. No, I did imagine that was the case, but I really was curious to know.
The dollar amounts are not of a magnitude that you should be concerned with.
Okay. Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I think those accounts he's talking about are a lot of little scholarship things.
I can
at the high
imagine.
school or
I've seen them. Yes,
Yeah.
I know
But I'm
exactly
gonna
what we're
ask
talking
Steve
about
Cirillo
here.
to come up. I know Steve, first of all, is a big proponent of the quarterly tax billing, but also Steve may want to, if you have any questions about what we're now working on to address some concerns they have, Steve can answer that. So.
Well, thank you. When I think, first of all, I am a proponent of quarterly tax bill. Department of Revenue asked me to go around, do a circuit around Massachusetts trying to convince cities and towns to do this back in the 80s. So one of the things you should take into consideration is we get the bulk of our approximately $250 million inflow of cash in approximately 14 days of the calendar year. And the rest of the 365 days of the calendar year, money is flowing out to make payroll, to pay vendor payments, or debt service payments, or whatever. But we get the bulk of our money in only 14 days. A couple of days prior to the quarterly real estate bills, a couple of days prior to the large excise tax bill, the quarterly state aid payments that come at the end of every 3-month period. And so we live from moment to moment on the cash we've generated in those 14 days while we're waiting for the next inflow of cash. For instance, we were discussing this today at the department heads meeting, that I'm actually looking forward to the third quarter bill going out, because our cash, which I was keeping in investment accounts to earn interest, we're taking it out of there to pay the ongoing daily bills until we get that third quarter bill out the door, which will happen in the next week and a half. So at that point in time, we're drawing down our money market accounts, lowering our possibility of generating more interest yield, although the interest yield is only 0.85%, which is very small. The other reason why I'm a proponent of quarterly is because these interest rates are not going to stay here forever. I think that when the unemployment rate hits 6.5%, I believe the Fed has said that they're going to raise the rates. And I'm an optimist, and I believe that's going to be occurring in the near future. And at that point in time, if you're on a semi-annual rate, as Dick Sullivan has said, you'd have to borrow money for a longer period, because you'd have a longer gap between when you build the first bill and the second bill. That'd be a long period of time. In semi-annual billing processes, cities and towns regularly borrowed money to pay for their ongoing bills. They call it TANs, tax anticipation, or RANs, revenue anticipation notes, to pay their everyday bills until that real estate bill went out. So I think the quarterly bill is the right way of doing it.
Okay. I'll stop thinking about it.
Okay, Selectman Daley, do you have any?
Yes, I just wanted to say that Mike DePietro is here with us tonight, our new controller, and he is going to get going on the fraud risk assessment effort. And I don't know if you have any other big changes you want to talk about? No? Okay. So then my final thing is to say that the audit committee voted unanimously to accept the audit reports on November 28th, 2012, and we recommend that this board vote to accept them as well.
Okay. And I would like to thank Selectman Daley, the Audit Committee, and our very thorough and diligent audit team for the good work they've done. I have at times suspected that you worked really, really hard trying to find something to put on your checklist for next year in your management letter, but I do believe that what we have accomplished together is that we continue to improve our practices, and we follow your advice, which we do appreciate. So I think we should all be quite pleased with this report and the condition of the town's finances. Any other comments from members? Selectman Benka?
Yeah, I actually just want to thank Nancy. I know you guys get paid to do this, but boards that I sit on and have sat on, when the question of volunteering for the audit committee comes up,
Duck.
people take a big step backwards. So it is something of a thankless and not the most exciting task.
Actually,
But-
I've kind of gotten into it, you know. I have always said I was, in spite of being the chair, the least qualified member of the audit committee. But we have a very good group and very congenial, and we all, try to dig into this stuff and work on improving things, and so it's a pretty good group.
And I would say, in the end, it's an effort that affects our bond rating, and Moody's listens. So, we do appreciate this, and it results in things that are actually of benefit financially to the town as well. Okay, then I move that we accept the report of the audit committee for
And the audit reports
and the
themselves.
audit reports themselves for fiscal 2012. We're talking 2012, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And now we will move to the next item, which is a series of licensing matters, beginning with an application for Brookline Subway. Mr. Patel? Would you come forward to the microphone, please? So I believe this is a pretty straightforward application. Can you just explain to us about what you anticipate in this application?
I like to introduce myself.
Sure.
My name is Bhavish, and I live in Melrose. Right now, I own a convenience store, and it's successfully run and managed by me from last 3 years. And I'm going to take over the Subway. It's located at 248 Harvard Street, and that's why I applied for the common vehicular license. I used to work in a Cockman's Market in Brookline in a daily section for more than 2 years, and I had that kind of the food experience. So
Okay,
I've-
you are planning to serve prepared sandwiches, soups, and salads,
yes,
that's correct?
Yes.
And have you also spoken with our health department personnel
Yes.
about the requirements for food preparation?
Yes, I talked to the health department, but they accept my application, but they will wait until the approval from the selectmen board of the selectmen. I already I already certified with a SubSafe certification. I am already certified with a allergen certification. So whatever the necessary certification, I already approve those.
They issue a favorable recommendation with conditions, and the conditions are that the establishment meets health code requirements, that the operator has food safety certification,
Yep.
that there's an odor control system, and that there's a pre-operational inspection from the health department before the final license is
Yeah,
issued.
sure.
You're aware of all those things?
Yep, I know that.
Okay. Any questions for, yes, Selectman Benka?
Yes, I'm 238 Harvard Street. Is this the existing Subway on the
Yeah.
corner of Harvard
Yes.
and Marion?
Yeah.
So you'll just be taking that over?
Yep, I'm
Right.
just taking over.
Good, okay.
Any other questions from members of the board? All right, then I will move that we approve the application of Brookline Subway, Inc., doing business as Subway, Bhavesh Patel, owner, for a common victular license at 238 Harvard Street. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
I'll abstain.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you so much for giving me a
Thank
chance.
you, and good luck.
Thank you.
Yep, thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you so much.
Next item is a change in name and stock transfer. I gather we are having a generational adjustment here.
We are, Madam Chair.
Please identify yourself, just for
I
the,
am Stephen Miller, firm McDermott, Quilty and Miller.
thank you.
And I have with me Randy Stein, who is trustee of the proposed recipient of generational trust, and also chief financial officer for Mr. Aptica, and also executor of Mr. Aptica's estate. We're seeking your approval to change the corporate name from Veronique Corporation to Alden Castle Corporation, and also to change the DBA from Veronique to Alden Castle. At the same time, we're seeking your approval for a transfer of stock into an irrevocable trust. The trust would hold 99% of the corporation. That 99% of the corporation would be non-voting shares. The only voting share would be held by Mr. Aptica. We've put some safeguards in the trust because the children are minors that would be receiving the benefits, beneficial interest in the trust. We've put some safeguards in the trust that they would not receive any distributions or income from the sale of alcoholic beverages until they reach the age of 21. We've done this before in this jurisdiction of the Commonwealth of Mass, but obviously not in the jurisdiction of Brookline. And this is a issue that Mr. Aptica wanted to deal with before the possible fiscal cliff occurs, which we all hope won't occur.
Gather there are probably several arrangements being made in anticipation of that. Any questions about this transfer, Selectman Daley?
Yes,
Actually,
so
it's not a transfer, but go ahead.
I see you're actually changing the DBA as well.
Right.
Yes.
Right? So is the restaurant changing its?
No, there was, I guess the stigma of what happened in the building with the foreclosures and bankruptcies and whatever. So this is just kind of a fresh approach, but it's basically going to operate as it is operating now as a function facility. Mostly.
Function facility, that was actually going to be my question. This doesn't anticipate going back to a full-time restaurant operation?
No, it does not. It'll be operating as a function facility.
Function facility, okay. Other questions, Selectman Benka?
Yeah, I just have a technical question about the way that this is listed on our calendar. And it's described, and I may be missing something, it's described as a transfer of stock from James Apteker, President, Treasurer, Secretary, Direct, and Sole Shareholder, to the Apteker Family Irrevocable Trust, 99%, and James Apteker, President, Treasurer, Secretary, Direct, and Sole Shareholder. And I'm wondering, should that be sole voting shareholder?
It should be sole and only voting shareholder,
Okay.
and the trust would be 99% non-voting.
Okay, or 100%, 99% of the shares, all non-voting, and
Right.
so it would just be sole voting
Sole
shareholder.
voting share.
Good, okay.
So it would read direct and sole voting shareholder, right?
I think it should be director as well.
Is that
Yeah, it's true.
Director,
OR.
yes, director.
Yeah, right.
director?
And sole voting shareholder.
Okay.
Kate, did you follow that? Okay. All right, are there any other questions on this item?
There's no change in manager?
No changes, no.
No other changes? Okay, then, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak either in favor or in opposition to this change? Seeing and hearing none, I will move approval of the application of Veronique Corporation doing business as Veronique for and holder of an all kinds alcoholic beverage license, etc., as written in the calendar, for a change of corporate name from Veronique Corporation to Alden Castle Corporation, from DBA Veronique to Alden Castle, and a transfer of stock from James Apteker, President, Treasurer, Secretary, Director, and sole shareholder to the Apteker Family Irrevocable Trust, James Apteker, President, Treasurer, Secretary, Director, and sole voting shareholder. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Good luck as Alden Castle,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
whoever that.
And in light of your tie, happy holidays.
Okay, next item is, whoops, I lost my piece of paper here. Transfer of a liquor license from India to Kikuman. This is a Section 12 common victualler with an all kinds alcoholic beverage license. And I note that we did receive certification of safe service since we first received the application, so.
Good evening. My name's David Lipschitz. I'm an attorney, Siegel, Lipschitz and Wilsons in Wellesley, and a Brookline resident. I represent Kikkoman, Chef Tim Maslow, and Jonathan Fennelly, and Michael Staub, who is our consultant in the transfer of this license and the opening of a new establishment at 1665 Beacon Street.
Okay.
We're looking for a common victualler license, application transfer, and entertainment license. The concept of the restaurant is a contemporary modern American. We're not looking for any increase in seating. Current seating is 68 seats. The new concept will have 14 bar seats and as part of the 68 seats.
Okay, and the new name is Rebel?
Rebelle.
Rebel, oh,
Rebelle.
Rebelle, okay.
Sure, please.
Further information and some photographs of the applicant's existing business and some press as well.
Oh, okay. What we usually look for is a menu.
Leave
It's
it,
in
it is in the
there.
packet.
There is a
It's
menu.
in our packet.
Well, that's,
Was it in the packet?
Yep.
it's
Yes.
a sort of a teaser menu, I thought.
It's heavily on the raw side.
Right, seems to be. Okay. Thank you.
So as part of the acquisition, Chef Maslow is going to be completely renovating the restaurant, new ventilation system, new kitchen. He's also looking to put in a prep kitchen in the basement, update the HVAC, new bathrooms. He's looking to make a substantial renovation and investment, not only into the neighborhood, but into the space.
And because of the way we get your information, I just would like you to tell us, I know we have the proposed hours of operation for food service, but there's not a requirement that you tell us the hours of operation for beverage service. So would you like to explain what your operating hours would be for alcoholic beverages?
They would be the same. So we're looking for 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. With bar service, with food, and then on Sundays, at least, the application states from 12 to 3, but we'd like to have Sunday brunch beginning at 11 o'clock.
Okay, I don't think, I'm not sure if we can approve this right now, but I would like you to be aware at least that we do have the option of an earlier opening on Sunday. The state has allowed us to authorize at 10 a.m. on Sunday for brunch service, and I'm not encouraging you to do that, but I'm telling you it's a possibility, that's all. I don't think we can do it now because it's not part of this application. But just so that I can write down again, would you repeat? I'm sorry, I was listening and not writing.
Hours of operation?
Yeah.
5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And then Sundays from, that's Monday through Sunday, 7 days.
Monday through Saturday,
Monday
right.
through Saturday?
right.
No, you want to? Sunday dinner as well. Sunday dinner as well.
But Sunday, there's an earlier opening.
But Sunday, there would be an earlier opening between, we'd like 11, but
Yeah.
12 and 3,
12 is in the application.
yes.
Right,
Uh,
and that's
12.
part of why I'm trying to get it straight. What your application says is, this is for your common victualler, and I'm actually asking you a different question because the application did not ask you about when you would be serving alcoholic beverages. That's an omission. It's not, there's no place for you to write it down. And often we authorize common victualler hours that are different from alcoholic beverage. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that we understand what the actual hours of beverage service would be. That's all. I don't want you to misunderstand what's going
Oh,
on
okay.
here. Okay,
12 to 3.
okay, So,
12 to,
3, and then at night again during the evening hours from 5 to...
this is on, but
All
this
right.
is just on
On
Sunday.
Just
Sunday.
on Sunday.
all right, on Sunday, then, you actually mean from noon until close. What would your last service be
You're
on
gonna
Sunday?
close they're gonna close midday,
Oh,
say
I-
at 3 o'clock.
Oh,
and
I
then
see, so it's just
reopen
gonna
for
be a
dinner.
midday meal on Sunday, no
That's correct.
evening service?
No, and then there
No,
will be...
there would
no.
just be, it would close in the middle of the day and then
We're gonna
reopen
close in
for
the middle
dinner
of the
service.
day.
All right,
and
so
then
we're
open
gonna
again.
authorize, but we will actually authorize hours from noon until the time you cease service, even though you're closed
fine.
part of the time. I don't think we need to put the separation in. What we do not want is to inadvertently agree to authorize alcoholic beverage at 7 a.m., which some kitchens start early, okay? So that's part of
That's fine.
why you're getting this interrogation over hours.
So it's essentially 12 PM
To 1
to
a.m.
1 AM,
Right.
7 days a week.
No, only on Sunday will the restaurant open for brunch. On Monday through Saturday, it will be 5 PM to 1 AM.
Okay,
Okay, that's what I thought I heard you say, which is part of why, because the form here
yeah.
is different. Okay, so we're gonna try this one last time. Monday through Saturday, 5 PM to 1 AM.
Exactly.
And on Sunday, you're gonna be open from noon, even though you'll be closed for a portion of the day, until midnight?
1 AM.
1 AM, okay, noon until 1 AM.
Okay. The application, the reason for the confusion, the application is 12 PM to 1 AM, 7 days a week.
Right.
Okay.
We are trying to be clearer about this information. So I'm sorry, you're being put through the ringer here, but you're gonna be,
Yeah, not initially, they're going to be looking for lunch service. If the town would grant lunch service, but that's not the intent to open.
well, I would
That's it.
suggest that it's easy to come in and ask for a change of hours. So that's
That's
something we would certainly consider at a future time. Selectman Daley?
Yeah, is one of you Mr. Maslow? Yeah, come up to the microphone. So we have a safe serve thing that we got today, but it says Maslow C, so is that?
My middle initial is Clifford.
Oh, I see, okay. Thought maybe it was a family member. Okay, so I just want to,
You mean no photo ID?
that part of Brookline, which is kind of my neighborhood, but as pretty much all of Brookline, we have a heavy concentration of students living in the area, and we take our liquor laws very seriously. And I want you to just explain to me, you would be the manager of record, right?
Yes.
So I want you to explain to me what you understand your responsibilities are in terms of serving alcohol.
In terms of minors?
Yeah.
Okay, so no
And
minors.
over-serving and things
Okay,
like that.
yeah. So I recently finished my tips or serve safe alcohol training. So over-service is definitely not something we look to do. I don't know, sorry, I feel on the spot here. That's,
Yeah, that's what I'm meaning to do,
Yeah.
is put you on the
No,
spot.
I understand completely. Okay, so minors, card everybody 35 and under by visual appearance. Over service, if they come in clearly intoxicated, no service. And just every single manager on the floor and serve staff is tip certified, and they watch closely as drinks are served.
Okay, and,
I mean, I've been, I'd say, in charge of restaurants the last 10 years of my life, 7 of which at a large restaurant in New York, and 2 of which in Watertown. No such incidences with alcohol-related issues, over-service, or minors.
okay. Have you had a chance, has anyone talked to you about the record keeping you need to do? There needs to be a book that you keep your employees and the notation about their tip certification or whatever it is.
We keep track of, so at our other business in Watertown, we give the front of the house staff 3 months to obtain their tips or serve safe alcohol training. And we do keep track of that if it's still valid or not.
Okay.
Have you been given a copy of the Brookline liquor, alcoholic beverage regulations?
Yes.
One thing you might want to make note of is that we encourage having an alternate manager, because we do expect the manager is the person who is responsible for what happens, and it's sometimes helpful to have a designated second, sometimes in some businesses that are operating more hours than you are, sometimes even 3 people are designated with the authority to be a manager. I have the impression that a lot of your work experience has actually been as a chef, so will you be out front in this operation, or will you be behind the stove?
Well, the kitchen is going to be open, so.
We can see you.
Yeah, but not necessarily on the front of the house
Right.
floor.
Well, sometimes it's just a suggestion you might want to consider. You can appoint one of your employees to be an alternate manager. It doesn't cost you anything. It just simply provides you additional responsibility, another person who can be responsible. And if you are working in the kitchen, sometimes it's good to have a person in the front of the house who's qualified and
Actually,
authorized.
listed on the license is what you're
Correct.
asking for. Okay. Because,
Yeah.
we brought Jonathan Fenn along with us, who'll be the front of the house manager.
Well, you might
Really?
want him to become an alternate manager.
Okay, I wasn't certain it needed to be listed, so, okay.
Yes, it has to be listed, and he has to be appointed by us. So it's a quickie drop in, but we do need to know about him. We need to know that he's safe service certified, et cetera, in order to appoint him. But having said that, we do encourage that you do this.
And unfortunately, we can't do it tonight because it wasn't
Right.
part of tonight's
We can't do it,
application packet.
unfortunately, tonight, but it's a visit. I can't honestly
It's
tell
not
you.
necessarily something you
No,
have
it's not a
to
hearing.
pay
It's
your
just-
lawyers to come with you
No,
for.
just, I think what we
Sorry.
need is, what we require is, if he's to be a manager, I do think there has to be a Cory check. So he has to, the Selectmen's office can explain what is necessary, but basically what we're looking for is safe service certification. I believe he's required to have a Cory check in order to be an alternate manager. Those are the 2 things.
But even the alternate manager could just come on his own that
Yeah,
night.
right,
It
but I
doesn't have
think
to be
it's
a
perfectly
big-
all right for him to arrive all by himself with the proper documentation. And it usually goes very quickly.
And the purpose really is to provide some more flexibility in
Right.
your operation so that you're not there, well, you're not open for lunch and dinner, but it gives you a little bit more freedom to not be at the restaurant.
And I think I'm going to follow up Selectman Daley's comment. We do stings, and we do stings to every licensed alcoholic beverage establishment. So part of why it's really good to have an alternate manager is that there are at least 4 pairs of eyes paying attention to things. And that's part of why we will recommend that you do that. Okay, any other questions?
2 pairs.
2 pairs. 2 pairs, 4 eyes, 2 pairs, right.
I-
Additional eyes. Selectman Benka?
I just have one comment, and that's the menu on page 4 of the packet that you handed out. Last line. Pay your meals tax to Brookline and not to Watertown.
Right.
We'll get it.
When are you
Probably.
shooting to open?
Hopefully late March, with speedy approval, we hope.
Okay. So, do we have any other questions before we take a vote?
No, I just want to
yeah.
note that I thought you were very lucky that, to get a very nice letter from Jim Solomon, since
Right.
you're going to be directly competing with him
Competitors,
there
right.
across the street, but anyway.
All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak either in favor or in opposition to this approval of a license for a common victualler and an all-kinds beverage license? Yes, you'd like to comment? Please come forward and identify yourself at the microphone.
Hi guys, it's good to see you all. David from the Public House, basically across the street from Tim. I'm here for one reason. I can actually sum it up in one word: excitement.
Another competitor on board.
You have no idea what you have.
You guys are going to be
coming.
eating in each other's kitchens,
But
right?
you have, yes, but you have no idea what you have coming into this town. It could be groundbreaking. This kid is one of the most talented chefs in the entire country. And I've eaten at his place. He's opening up across the street from me. I cannot be more excited about this. He's professional. He's intelligent. His food is groundbreaking. His talent is immeasurable. And we at the Public House, all of us, my wife, my partner, everyone that works there is just busting at this news. It is amazing news for us, for the square. We were talking tonight that this is literally the final piece of the puzzle to put Coolidge Corner under.
Uh-oh. I don't think.
We're not going to go there tonight.
We're not going to.
Sorry. Please note that any vote of this board does not endorse that.
Right.
Although I think those of us who live in the Washington Square area have known for some time that
I live
one.
at that corner. I live on the corner of Winthrop and Beacon, so welcome. Right. I mean, this is nothing but good news for this town and for the square. It's amazing. And this kid can cook and everything on the menu. Again, it could be a mock-up menu. I don't know.
As Selectman Daley pointed out, it's mostly raw. He's not going to cook anything.
No,
that's
not true.
I saw Tim's face when she said that, and I don't think it is at all. And,
It's not.
It's okay.
What I do note is that the trout is apparently not swimming over from Watertown, at least not on this menu. And I know there's going to be
job to talk about his menu, but all I'm here to say is I just in 100% full support from the Public House. We look at ourselves, as kind of the anchor in the square, and we are just so happy and excited this is happening. And when we heard it, we heard the rumors, we were excited, and then when it was confirmed, we were really, really excited.
I think others look at themselves as the anchor in the square.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
More than one anchor.
We can have multiple. Actually, big boats need lots of anchors.
That's right.
So we've got a big boat here.
That's all I had to say. And
Room for
really
everybody.
Happy, so thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we are now ready to take a vote, and we've got three, actually, well, I guess it's two votes. The first is to approve the application of the transfer of a common victualler license from Tamarind Bay Coastal Indian Kitchen at 1665 Beacon Street, and for the transfer of an all kinds alcoholic beverage license as a common victualler at 1665 Beacon Street to Kikuman LLC, doing business as Rebelli, Timothy Maslow, manager. And finally, I move that we grant an entertainment license to include tape music for the same operator. All in favor of those three votes, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Are you putting the hours on this?
Well, we should name the hours, I guess. That's right. If I don't put it into the vote, we won't have them in the record. So yes, the hours of operation will be Monday through Saturday, 5 p.m. until 1 a.m., and on Sundays, noon until 1 a.m. Thank you for that reminder, Selectman Benka. Okay.
I'll say aye again, even with the
All right.
hours in.
All in favor, please say aye.
And I have not voted yet.
And Selectman Goldstein is
Aye.
abstain, are you
No,
voting
no,
for this?
no,
Okay, you're not abstaining, all right.
If
All in favor?
almost.
Okay, all right.
If David was against it,
Okay, all right. You're allowed to vote in favor, and the chair votes aye. That's unanimous approval. Look forward to seeing you in the spring.
So you do have the
Good luck.
option of an alternate manager.
Yeah.
You have the option of an earlier start Monday through Saturday, and you have the option of an earlier start for Sunday brunch.
Right. But
But
you
you
must
would have to come
return,
back.
it could be one trip for all of those, or not, depending on how you feel about things when you're ready to open. Okay? Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, happy holidays.
Good luck.
See you, Dave.
Okay. think we have, lost my documents again.
Did we do the tape too?
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we did.
We did. Final item is to take on the annual license renewals for common victular liquor and lodging house. And I'm going to confess somewhat unhappily, we have discovered we are getting a new database up and running, and if members would take a look at least at the renewals that you've got before you, you will see that we've tried to provide substantial additional information, much more than we had before us on previous votes to renew. But one of the things we've discovered in trying to provide more information, and some of this must go back many, many years. I can say, for example, I have seen a license vote that took place in 2001, which has been renewed annually year after year after year with no changes, but there are some inaccuracies. And I won't cite the operators, but I can tell you that there are some places where there are common victular licenses that were issued for operating hours starting at either 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., and those hours got inadvertently applied to alcoholic beverage licenses, and therefore we've got licenses with hours that are not authorized by the state. All right, so I will call it a scrivener's error if you like, but the database needs to be cleaned up. And in consultation with colleagues, I believe we have a reasonable solution to this problem, and that is a recommendation that we approve renewals of all of the licenses with whatever conditions we've got from either the health department or the building department in order to approve the applications, but to do it for a 6-month period instead of a 12-month period, with the intention of getting our database information. We're going to do a mailing to all license holders asking for certain information that is current and accurate in order to bring our database into current and accurate data. And then we would vote to renew for the next 6 months through the end of the year 2013, having updated our records. And hopefully that will be the last time we'll ever have to talk about this. But it seems very inappropriate, and in fact, in some cases, it would create non-compliance to vote an alcoholic beverage license with an opening hour at 6 a.m. So with that explanation, is there any question or discussion from members of the board about the license renewals? Mr. Kleckner, do you have anything you want to say?
I just had one late-breaking information. I was advised today that you saw that on Cecilia's at 840 Com Ave, I believe that they have withdrawn their application for renewal.
Ah, okay, so we would not vote them.
Correct.
All right, so then I can tell you it's on page 44 of 88 under the common victular listing. We will omit Cecilia's Pizzeria at 840 Commonwealth Avenue from our renewals when we take our vote.
Cognac Bistro, from the material we had, there had been a complaint that they had some non-conforming structures in back. Apparently, they had filed something with the planning board, and it was somehow never docketed and discussed to give them approval for their storage area out and back. So should we
Actually,
vote that with the...
We can vote it with a condition because I understand that they have now set a date to go to the planning board.
Right.
So it would be with the condition of approval from the planning board. So yes, Cognac Bistro should be voted with a condition that they receive approval from the planning board. Any other questions or comments?
Can I note the matters that I'm going to abstain my vote on to prior business relationship?
Sure. Do you want to identify the individual establishments by name?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'll say on the Common victualler license, I'm going to abstain on Khan LLC, DBA Cafe Nicholas, Doolin Cottage, DBA Public House, Kodo Japanese, DBA Osaka, Fair Share Inc., DBA Village Fair, and Isora LLC, DBA Washington Square Tavern. On the wine and malt package stores, I will abstain on Brookline Market Inc., DBA Kirkman's, and on all kinds common victualler alcoholic beverage license, that'd be Doolin Cottage, DBA Public House, Kodo Japanese, DBA Osaka, and Isora LLC, DBA Washington Square Tavern.
It's good to know Selectman Goldstein's business is doing so well.
It's out of like many, many more.
Yeah,
Not
question?
clients.
Yeah, there was a December 7th memo with regard to the lodging house renewals that called out, it's the white packet.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what the status is of those two licenses.
Yes, I believe we may have had something that we forgot to put back in the packet, because as you remember, this was on the
Right.
docket last week, but
Right.
the Health Department did issue a
They-
proposed condition, and
I think
believe
it's,
we may have failed to include that. We
Well,
had it in last week.
the last paragraph of that December 7th is renewed for 60 days.
Oh, that is.
Subject, is that,
That is correct.
that does the
That is
trick?
the most current
Okay.
recommendation, yes.
okay. So those two would be renewed for 60 days, subject to complying with town inspectional requirements?
Correct.
right.
Okay.
Do you want to name those addresses,
Yeah,
Selectman Binka, and that way it'll be recorded?
1459 Beacon Street and 400 Heath Street.
Well, I'd like to make a
Yep.
motion with respect to the common victualler licenses.
Sure.
I would like to move that the common,
And alcohol.
Oh, and
you want to vote them together?
I think,
They're separately on the list.
I think we have to vote, we have to take separate votes. We'll do common victual renewals, and then we have to vote, I think, each category of alcohol. There's all kinds common victular, there's all kinds package stores, and there's wine and malt common victulars.
Sorry.
They're all, can we just do them in a group?
Okay, I'll move on the common victular licenses with
Yeah.
the ones that were in our packet tonight with the big black writing across the top. I'm moving
Right.
these with the exception of
Cecilia.
Sicily's Pizzeria, and with the condition on Cognac Bistro that we previously discussed, that these be renewed for a period of 6 months through June 30th, 2013, and that the Selectman's Office is instructed to send a letter to each licensee informing them of the 6-month renewal and requesting that they provide supplemental information detailing hours of operation. Further, that the Board of Selectmen will consider the extension of the license for the remaining 6 months after considering such hours of operation and without further fee related to the extension of the license for such further 6-month period.
Very loyally. Yeah. Good job.
Well done.
How would you feel about passing that over to Kate?
I would be happy to.
She's gotta
but
read it
I
off
need to
again
read
about
it
the
again
alcohol.
for the alcohol ones, so
Yeah,
I won't give it up yet.
okay. All right, so moved. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
With his exceptions, and the chair votes aye. Great, then
Now
I
I'd
would
like
say,
to make another
Yep.
motion for the liquor licenses.
including all kinds common victular, all kinds package stores, wine and malt common victular, and wine and malt package stores, and clubs.
Okay. I would like to move that these be renewed for a period of 6 months through June 30th, 2013, that the Selectman's Office is instructed to send a letter to each licensee informing them of the 6-month renewal and requesting that they provide supplemental information detailing hours of operation. Further, that the Board of Selectmen will consider the extension of the license for the remaining 6 months after considering such hours of operation and without further fee related to the extension of the license for such further 6-month period.
So moved. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Marmel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
with exceptions, and the chair votes aye. And finally, lodging house licenses, with the two conditions that Selectman Benka has provided. Then I think we just move to approve lodging house license renewals for the 2013 year. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Mermel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And I believe,
No, we have one further thing. Selectman Goldstein was appointed, the
Oh,
selectman.
yes.
On a committee of 7 for the portable classrooms. And I was appointed the selectman on the committee of 7 for the high school study. And I have a conflict on the date they're planning to meet on the high school, so we have agreed to switch.
and so we will now take a motion to replace Selectman Goldstein on the portable classrooms with Selectman Daley, and to replace Selectman Daley on the high school concept study with Selectman Goldstein. All in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Mermel?
Aye.
Selectman Benka?
Aye.
Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, I do believe that concludes
Wanna
our
say,
business.
Happy holidays and
Yes.
Happy New Year to
Peaceful,
everybody.
Peaceful, happy holidays.
Peace and happiness, and this is our last meeting for the year 2012. Peace and good health to all.